Hey everyone, this is Taehyung. Before we start, tell me where you are listening from tonight. I always find it comforting to imagine people from different places listening to the same story under the same sky. Maybe that's what keeps me grounded lately, knowing that somewhere, someone out there might understand what I'm about to say. Tonight feels heavier than most nights. Maybe because the memory I'm about to share still lives somewhere in the corners of my chest, quiet but breathing. It's not a sad memory, not really. But it's one of those that changes how you see love, family, and time. This happened not too long ago when I went back to Daegu. I don't go home often these days. Between work, schedules, and the strange weight of being seen everywhere, I've grown used to solitude even when surrounded by people. But my mother had been asking for weeks. She wanted me to come home for a few days, just to rest, she said, just to eat her cooking again. So I did. I packed a small bag, got into the car, and drove through the quiet highways that lead back to my hometown. The radio played softly some old ballad that reminded me of the winters I used to spend alone in Seoul, trying to make something out of myself. When I arrived, my mom was standing by the gate. Her hair had more gray in it, but her smile was the same. The kind of smile that told me no matter how far I've gone, she's still my home. She hugged me for a long time. I think she missed the version of me that used to sit in the living room, strumming the guitar, singing softly when the rain fell outside. We spent the first evening like we always did. Dinner, laughter, a little bit of scolding about my sleep schedule, and her usual nagging about how I should eat more rice. It felt warm, safe, familiar, but the next day, something unexpected happened. That morning, my mom told me we were going to the local market. I hadn't been there in years. It used to be the place where she'd drag me on weekends to buy fresh vegetables and where I'd complain about carrying the heavy bags. We walked through the same narrow alleys, past the same fish stalls and fruit vendors who somehow hadn't aged a day. Everyone recognized her instantly. Mrs. Kim, it's been so long, they said. And then their eyes turned to me, soft and surprised. Taehyung, is that really you? I smiled, bowed politely, the usual routine. It was nostalgic, almost comforting, until we reached a flower stall near the end of the market. And there she was, standing behind the counter, arranging lilies with those same careful hands I once held years ago. My ex, for a second, time stopped. The sound of the market faded, the air thinned, and all I could see was her. The way her hair fell over her shoulders, the small crease that formed near her eyes when she smiled. She looked different, but the same kind of different that hurts. Like a song you used to love but haven't listened to in years, yet the melody still knows your name. My mom froze too. Her hand, which had been holding onto mine, went still. Then she whispered almost in disbelief, Taehyung, isn't that? I nodded. Yeah, it was her. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since the night we decided that love wasn't enough to hold two people whose lives were heading in completely different directions. She had dreams that didn't include cameras. I had a world that wouldn't allow privacy. But here she was standing in front of me again, holding a bouquet of lilies, the same flowers she used to love. She looked up, and when our eyes met, she froze too. It wasn't awkward at first, just silent, heavy, like two old memories trying to figure out if they should shake hands or walk away. And then my mom did something I didn't expect. She walked toward her, slowly, carefully. Hi, my mom said softly. It's been a long time. Her voice cracked just a little, that kind of break you hear when a heart remembers something it never really forgot. My ex smiled politely. Yes, it's been a while, Mrs. Kim, and that was it. No drama, no confrontation, just two women standing between years of love, loss, and the quiet ache of time. But then I saw my mom's eyes. They started to water. Her lips trembled, and before I could reach out, she began to cry. It wasn't loud, just a quiet kind of crying, the kind that makes you want to look away because it feels too honest. Everyone around turned their head, and I just stood there, frozen, unsure if I should comfort her or pretend it wasn't happening. My ex reached out instinctively. She grabbed my mom's hand gently and whispered, "Please don't cry." But my mom shook her head. "No, it's okay. It's just, I didn't expect to see you again. You were like family to us. I always thought of you that way." And then she smiled through the tears. "I'm glad you're doing well." Something about that moment felt too heavy for words. It wasn't about old love or regret anymore. It was about people, the kind who once shared meals, holidays, laughter, suddenly realizing how much time has taken from them. When my mom turned back to me, her eyes said 1,000 things. None of them were judgment. None of them were sadness, just reflection. On the drive home, she didn't speak much. She stared out the window, and I could tell she was lost in memories. Finally, she said quietly, "She loved you sincerely, Taehyung. I could always see it." I didn't reply, because deep down, I already knew that night I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were loud. I kept replaying her face, my mom's tears, the sound of the market fading into silence. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel for a long time. Maybe love doesn't really disappear. Maybe it just changes its form into gratitude, into peace, into a soft ache that stays with you even after everything else fades. That night, the air in my old room felt different. The same poster still hung on the wall, a little faded, edges curling. The same guitar leaned against the corner, strings slightly out of tune, but it didn't feel like the room I used to know. Maybe because I wasn't the same person who once dreamed inside it. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her face, not the way it looked when she left, but the way it looked today. Softer, wiser, maybe happier. There was no bitterness in her eyes, no trace of regret, just peace. And that hurt in a way I didn't expect. Because when you see someone you once loved finally at peace, you realize how long you've been carrying the weight of what used to be. The next morning, my mom acted like nothing had happened. She cooked breakfast, humming under her breath, and asked if I wanted more rice, but I could tell she hadn't slept much either. Her eyes were swollen not from exhaustion, but from emotions she didn't quite know how to name. While we ate, she said suddenly, "She looked well." I froze, chopsticks mid-air. "Yeah, she did." My mom smiled faintly. "I used to worry about her, you know, after everything ended between you two. I didn't know what to say." "You did?" "Of course," she said softly. "You think mothers only worry about their own children? She was part of this family for years, Taehyung. She used to help me cook, She called me mom sometimes. I can't just erase that. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I realized then that when a relationship ends, it's not just two people who separate, it's families, connections, entire worlds that quietly drift apart. Later that day, I walked to the river near our old school. The air was crisp and autumn leaves floated along the surface like small pieces of time refusing to sink. That river used to be our spot, mine and hers. Back when we thought love was enough to rewrite destiny, I sat on the bench where we carved our initials years ago. The letters had faded, but I could still make them out. I traced them with my fingers and smiled a sad kind of smile, the kind that understands too much now. She used to wait for me here even when it rained. She'd bring 2 cups of hot chocolate, one always slightly sweeter because she said I couldn't handle the bitterness. And she was right, I never could. Not with chocolate, not with life, not with endings. I remember the night we broke up. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no accusations, just silence. The kind that builds slowly when two hearts start to drift in different directions. She said, "You're going to be someone the world talks about every day, but I just want a life that's quiet." I said, "I wish I could give you that." She smiled through tears. "You already gave me enough." We sat there, side by side, watching the lights of soul flicker in the distance. And when she walked away that night, I thought it was the last time I'd ever see her. Until yesterday. Now, years later, my mother cried in front of her, and I couldn't even move. Maybe because deep down, I wasn't sure which of us she was crying for. For the girl she missed? For the love that once filled this house? Or for me, her son, who learned how to love but never quite figured out how to let go? That night, after dinner, I sat outside on the porch. The cicadas were loud. The stars scattered across the Daegu sky. My mom joined me quietly, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. For a while, we didn't speak. Then she said, "You know, I used to pray that you two would find your way back to each other someday." I looked at her. "You did?" She nodded. "But now I think maybe it was never about that. Maybe what you both needed was closure. The kind that doesn't come from talking, but from seeing each other again and realizing you're both okay." I didn't say anything. I just listened to her voice, the voice that had guided me my whole life. She continued, "When I saw her, all the memories came back, not because I wanted them to, but because love leaves traces, Taehyung, even when it's over." Her words lingered in the air long after she went back inside. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel everything, the nostalgia, the gratitude, the ache, the relief. Later, I took out my old sketchbook from under the bed. Inside were pages of doodles, drawings of faces, sunsets, streets, all the little things I once found beautiful. On one of the pages, I'd drawn her. Not perfectly, but enough to remember her by. I stared at that page for a long time. Then I closed the book and whispered, "Thank you." Not because I missed her, but because without her, I wouldn't have learned how to love better or how to forgive the version of myself that didn't know how to stay. Sometimes I think love is like a song you never finish writing. You keep changing the chords, adjusting the lyrics until one day you realize it was never meant to be complete. It just needed to exist long enough to teach you something. That night, I fell asleep with a strange kind of peace. Not the loud, overwhelming kind that feels like victory, but the quiet kind, the kind that comes when your heart finally stops asking, "What if?" And in my dream, I saw her again, not as the girl I once lost, but as someone walking down a different road, smiling. I didn't chase her this time. I just waved and she waved back. When I woke up, the first thing I felt wasn't pain, it was gratitude. Maybe that's what healing really is, not forgetting the story, but remembering it differently. The morning after that dream, the air in Daegu felt lighter. The early sun slipped through the thin curtains, and for a moment the whole house glowed with warmth. I sat up in bed and listened to the quiet hum of life downstairs, the clatter of dishes, the low sound of my mom's voice humming some old trot song from the radio. There was comfort in the ordinary, and yet something inside me had shifted. When I walked downstairs, my mom was setting the table for breakfast. There were two bowls of rice, a plate of fried eggs, kimchi, and doenjang soup, my favorite. She looked up and smiled, that soft, tired smile that carried years of love and worry. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, better than I thought." She poured tea into my cup. The steam rose slowly between us, filling the silence with warmth. Then she said quietly, "You've grown quieter lately. Not the kind of quiet that means peace, but the kind that comes when you're trying not to feel too much." I looked at her, surprised. She always saw right through me. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, "the kind of lie we tell to people who love us too much." But she just smiled like she'd heard it too many times before. "You don't have to be fine all the time, Taehyung." Those words lingered because being fine had become my habit, my armor, my performance, my survival. In a world that expected me to be strong, charming, confident, I learned to hide the moments when I felt fragile. After breakfast, I took a walk alone. The streets of Daegu were quiet, lined with ginkgo trees that were just starting to turn gold. I passed the corner bakery where I used to buy bread before school, the convenience store that still smelled like instant noodles and cheap coffee. Everything looked smaller now, not because it had changed, but because I stopped in front of an old photo shop. In the display window, there were dozens of faded portraits, families, couples, kids in school uniforms. And then, right there in the corner, I saw something that made my heart stop. It was a photograph of my mom and me, taken years ago. I must have been 16. I remember the day vividly. I had just gotten into my school's music club, and she'd insisted we take a photo together to celebrate the beginning of something beautiful. The shop owner saw me staring and came outside, wiping his hands on his apron. "Ah, Taehyung, it's been a long time," he said warmly. "Your mother still comes by sometimes. She always talks about you." I smiled, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "She does?" "Every time," he chuckled. "She says, 'That's my son. He used to be shy, but he had stars in his eyes even back then.'" I laughed softly. That sounds like her. But as I walked away, I realized that's the kind of love that doesn't fade, the kind that stays even when you've grown, changed, or drifted far away. When I got home, I found my mom in the garden. She was trimming the small rose bush near the fence, the same one my ex and I had planted together one spring afternoon years ago. She looked up and said, "Do you remember when we planted these?" I nodded. "Yeah." She almost cut her hand trying to shape the stems. Mom chuckled. She was terrible at gardening, but she tried anyway. Her tone wasn't sad this time, it was light, almost fond. "She came by earlier," Mom said suddenly. My chest tightened. "She did?" "Yes, just for a moment. She brought flowers, lilies again." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. "She wanted to thank me," Mom continued, "for being kind to her yesterday. She said she was nervous about seeing us again, but also grateful." I swallowed hard. "What did you say?" Mom smiled faintly. "I told her that love doesn't vanish just because people walk separate paths. It just learns to live quietly, like sunlight filtering through old curtains." Her words hit me deep, maybe because they came from a woman who had lived enough to understand that love is never simple. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Taehyung, don't carry your memories like wounds. Carry them like pages in a book, parts of your story, not the end of it." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. I sat on the porch again, looking at the same stars I used to count as a kid. The night air smelled faintly of roses and rain. For the first time in a long while, I let myself open the messages I'd kept hidden in an old folder on my phone, the ones from her. They weren't dramatic, just ordinary. "Did you eat? Don't forget your scarf. I saw your performance. I'm proud of you." And the last one, the one I never replied to, "You'll always have someone cheering for you, even if it's from far away." I stared at it for a long time. Then I finally typed a message, not to send, just to write. "Thank you for loving me when I didn't even know how to love myself." I hit save and locked the phone. It felt enough. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation, it's a quiet moment where your heart finally stops resisting what happened. I went back inside, and Mom was still awake. She was sitting in the living room, knitting something, a scarf, probably. She looked up and smiled. "You used to hate when I stayed up late," she said. "Now I get it," I replied. "Some nights just don't want to end." She patted the seat next to her. "Come sit then." We sat together in silence, the kind that only exists between people who've known each other forever. After a while, she said softly, "You've changed, Taehyung." I looked at her. "How so?" "You've learned how to let go without losing kindness. That's rare." Her words felt like a blessing, the kind that doesn't come from prayer, but from being seen completely by someone who's been there all along. As I went to bed that night, I realized something. Healing isn't a straight road. It's a circle. You live, you grow, you hurt, you forgive, and somehow you end up back where you started. Only now you see everything differently. Maybe that's why they call it coming home. The days that followed felt different, quieter, softer somehow. It wasn't that life had suddenly changed, but the way I saw it had. The smallest things carried new meaning. The way my mom folded laundry while humming under her breath, the smell of soy sauce and garlic drifting from the kitchen, the laughter of kids playing in the distance. For years, I'd chased things that glittered. Now I was beginning to understand the beauty of things that simply glowed. That morning, I joined my mom in the backyard. She was watering the small garden, the same patch of soil that had seen everything from my childhood scraped knees to our loud family barbecues. The roses were blooming again. You've been spending a lot of time out here, I said. She smiled. It's peaceful. You should try it. The flowers don't expect anything from you. They just grow, no matter what season they've been through. Her words hit like a quiet truth. People, unlike flowers, often expect too much from life, from others, from themselves. I watched as she bent down to pull a few weeds. Her hands were wrinkled, veins faintly visible under her skin, but they were steady. Those hands had held me through sickness, through heartbreak, through every failure I was too ashamed to admit. When she stood up, she looked at me with that knowing expression only mothers have. You've been thinking a lot lately, she said. I laughed softly. You can tell? Of course. You wear your thoughts on your face, just like your father. She poured water onto the roses and added, your father used to stay up late writing letters he never sent. Maybe that's where you get it from your way of keeping things inside until they find the right time to come out. I sat on the wooden step and asked, did you ever get tired of waiting for things to make sense? Mom thought for a moment. Sometimes, but I learned something. Life doesn't always make sense in the moment. It's only when you look back that you realize every confusion, every pain had a purpose, even if it was just to teach you compassion. I nodded slowly. That word, compassion, lingered in my head, because that's what I saw in her when she cried seeing my ex again. It wasn't bitterness or regret. It was compassion, the kind that comes when you love deeply and let go gracefully. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked out to the old veranda with a blanket around my shoulders. The moon was bright, the kind that makes everything look a little more honest. I thought about her, my ex, and all the years between us. We had been two kids who believed love could fix anything, but time had shown us that love, while beautiful, isn't always enough to keep two people together. Still, I didn't regret any of it. Not the laughter, not the tears, not even the silence that came after, because every moment had taught me how to feel and how to see people. Somewhere between those thoughts, I heard the floor creak. It was my mom again, holding 2 cups of tea. You're still awake, she said. Couldn't sleep. Your mind's too loud, she smiled. Here, drink this. We sat together under the night sky, the same way we used to when I was younger. I told her stories from my trainee days, the sleepless nights, the endless rehearsals, the fear of not being enough. She listened without interrupting, her eyes full of empathy. When I finished, she said something that made my chest tighten. You know, Taehyung, when I saw her, your ex, it wasn't the past that made me cry. It was seeing how much both of you had grown. You both learned how to stand on your own. That's what love should do. It should teach you to walk without holding on too tightly. I took a deep breath. I think she did teach me that, even if it hurt. Mom nodded. Love that doesn't hurt. A little isn't love. It's a story without weight. We both fell quiet again, sipping tea under the moonlight. The night carried a soft kind of honesty, the kind that only appears when you stop pretending you're okay and finally admit that you're healing. After a while, Mom looked up and said, you know what I prayed for when I saw her again? I shook my head. I prayed that she finds peace and that you do too, but not together, separately in your own ways. There was no bitterness in her voice, just acceptance, something in my heart loosened. Maybe forgiveness doesn't always start with the person who hurt you. Maybe it starts with the people who remind you you're still capable of love. I turned to her and asked, "Do you ever think love is meant to come back?" She smiled gently. "Real love never leaves Taehyung. It just changes form. Sometimes it becomes friendship. Sometimes it becomes music. And sometimes it just becomes a memory that teaches you how to love better next time." That line stayed with me long after we went back inside. When I lay down in bed, the clock ticked softly in the dark. I thought about how much my mother had carried the years of raising me alone, the endless sacrifices, the tears she never let me see. And yet, she still found space in her heart to forgive someone who once broke mine. Maybe that's what real strength looks like. Not in the ability to move on quickly, but in the grace to remember without resentment. I finally drifted to sleep that night with one thought, that love doesn't end. It just finds new ways to stay. A few days later, the air in Daegu started to cool. Autumn was coming, the season that always felt like a quiet reminder of change. The leaves outside had begun to turn gold, and every breeze carried that bittersweet scent of wood and wind. I woke up earlier than usual that morning. My mom was already in the kitchen, making breakfast. The smell of toasted seaweed and miso soup filled the air. I sat at the table, still half asleep, watching her move between the stove and the counter like a rhythm she'd done her entire life. "Morning," I said. "Morning," she smiled. "Eat before it gets cold." We didn't talk much while eating. The silence wasn't heavy, it was comfortable, like two people who didn't need words to understand each other. After breakfast, she said quietly, "I'm going to visit your grandmother's grave later. You should come with me." I hesitated. I hadn't been there in years, not because I didn't care, but because every time I went, I was reminded of the things I hadn't said, the people I'd lost, and the time I could never get back. But I nodded. "Okay." The drive there was quiet. We passed through narrow roads lined with persimmon trees, their orange fruits glowing under the soft morning sunday. I rolled down the window, letting the wind brush against my face. For the first time in a long while, I felt too still. When we arrived, the air was calm, just the sound of leaves rustling and a distant bird call. My mom kneeled down first, brushing off the leaves from the tombstone. She placed a small bouquet of white chrysanthemums beside it, then lit a stick of incense. I watched her lips move in silent prayer. I didn't know what she was saying, but I knew who she was speaking to. Her voice trembled slightly, not from sadness, but from the weight of love that time could never erase. After a few moments, she said softly, "You can talk to her too, you know." I knelt beside her. The tombstone felt cold beneath my hands. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered. "It's been a while." The words came out awkward at first, but then they began to flow about life, about music, about my mistakes, and about how much I missed being that boy who believed everything would turn out okay. When I finished, Mom placed her hand on my shoulder. "She'd be proud of you," she said, "not because of what you've achieved, but because you never stopped being kind, even when life tried to make you hard." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You really think so?" She smiled. "I don't think. I know." We sat there for a long time, the wind moving gently through the trees. And then she added, "You know, I used to come here when you were in Seoul. Whenever things got too heavy, I'd talk to her, tell her about you, about how proud I was and how worried I was too." That hit deeper than I expected. All those nights I'd spent in hotel rooms, on stages, in airports, she'd been here, whispering to someone who could no longer answer, just to keep her faith in me alive. I turned to her and said, "You've always carried more than I realized." She gave me that knowing smile again. That's what mothers do. We carry until our children learn to carry themselves. On the way home, the silence was full not of emptiness but of meaning. When we got back, I helped her unpack the offerings from the car, and then, as she went inside, I stayed outside a little longer. The afternoon light stretched across the yard, golden and slow. The roses, the same ones we talked about before, swayed gently in the breeze. That's when I saw something tucked under the flower pot. A small folded piece of paper. It was a note. From her, my ex. The handwriting was unmistakable. Small, neat, and a little curved at the edges, just like I remembered. I hesitated before unfolding it. My heart started to race. It said, "I didn't come to bring back the past. I just wanted to say thank you to your mom for the warmth she gave me when I didn't deserve it. And to you for loving me in a way that still makes me grateful. I hope you're happy, even if it's not with me." Why? I read it again, then again. And then I smiled not out of sadness, but out of peace. Because for the first time, it didn't hurt to think of her. That evening, I showed the note to my mom. She read it silently, then folded it neatly and handed it back to me. "She's grown," she said simply. "So have I replied. Mom looked at me with that soft pride that only comes when you see your child becoming the person you always hoped they'd be. "Then maybe it's time to let the past rest." I nodded. "Yeah, I think it already has." That night, I sat in my old room again, the same one I'd left years ago, now filled with a mix of old posters, framed photos, and the quiet hum of nostalgia. I picked up my guitar and began to play softly, just random chords at first, then melodies that turned into words I didn't even know were inside me. It wasn't a song about heartbreak anymore. It was about grace, the kind that lets two people meet, love, fall apart, and still wish each other well. As I sang quietly, I realized something my mom had been trying to show me all along. Life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning to hold it gently so it doesn't harden you. When I finished, Mom's voice came from the hallway. "That sounded beautiful," she said. "Thanks," I smiled. "It's just something new." "Keep it," she replied. "It sounds like healing." I looked out the window at the night sky, calm, familiar, infinite. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't chasing anything. I wasn't running from anything either. I was just here, and maybe that was enough.